What is going on YouTube? Jim here with a deep dive look today at Star Fox 64. Got a lot to cover today. You clearly saw the runtime of today's video. I will post some timestamps in the description box below so that you can fast forward to some stuff. There's going to be some parts of the video where I'm not talking, and I'm going to let the game do the talking for itself. Actually, one of those is getting ready to start. I want to show you guys the introduction to this phenomenal game without any interruptions. Afterwards, we'll come back. We have some review topics to talk about today, and I definitely want to talk about the N64 controller. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Message from General Pepper. Priority 1. We need your help, Star Fox. Andross has declared war. He's invaded the Lilat system and is trying to take over Corneria. Our army alone can't do the job. Hurry, Star Fox.
Corneria, fourth planet of the Lilat system. The evil Andross turned this once thriving system into a wasteland of near extinction. General Pepper of the Cornerian army was successful in exiling this maniacal scientist to the barren, deserted planet Venom. 5 years later, General Pepper noticed strange activity coming from Venom. James McLeod, Pigma Dangar, and Peppy Hare of the Star Fox team were sent to investigate. Upon their arrival, Pigma betrayed the team, and James and Peppy were captured by Andross. Peppy barely escaped Venom and returned home to tell James' son, Fox, about his father's fate. A few years have passed. Andross has again invaded the Lilat system. General Pepper has turned to a new Star Fox team, headed by Fox McCloud, to save Corneria and free the Lilat system once again.
It's about time you showed up, Fox. You're the only hope for our world.
I'll do my best. Andross won't have his way with me.
Good luck.
Open the wing. Check your G-diffuser system.
Falco here. I'm fine.
This is Peppy. All systems go.
Flippy here. I'm okay.
I see him up ahead. Let's rock and roll.
Yes, let's rock and roll indeed. I wanted to include that opening sequence in this review because it is my definitive review of Star Fox 64. And I wanted to paint a picture of some of the epicness I think that this game includes. Additionally, when looking for that footage online, I didn't find any good quality footage. And I figured since I was pulling out my laptop and my Elgato and I had to rip everything apart to get some high quality recording for you guys, I might as well include the introduction sequence as well. Now, I have a lot to say about this game. Clearly, you looked at the timestamp. You know that I have a lot to say. I want to start by saying from just a high level, I really appreciate what this game did for the overall genre of video gaming. And I know that it hasn't received the love that it should, but when you really look at what Star Fox 64 specifically brought to the video game space, I think you will agree with me and be very pleasantly surprised and probably shocked, maybe even, at some of the things that this game did that so many other games have copied from. So the game, just to kind of set everything up, if you want to consider this the background, there isn't a ton of story to this game, but the game focuses on the team known as Star Fox. You play as Fox McCloud. Fox McCloud is the son of James McCloud, who was a legendary pilot who unfortunately was betrayed during a mission and died. Kinda sad. Fox follows in his footsteps, becomes the leader of this organization, and vows to defend the universe from all evil. Seems like a pretty daunting task. Things are going pretty well until this dude named Andros starts to make a lot of trouble, and he is exiled to a planet known as Venom. There, on Venom, he begins to create this hellacious robotic army and declares war on the entire Lilat system. As the war begins and continues, it's very clear that the local defenses cannot withstand Andros's army. They call upon Team Star Fox, who makes a triumphant return, and that is where the game picks up. It's obviously kind of silly, but in terms of a video game, it makes sense if you think about it. What I really liked about this game was that as you progress through it, you really are the hero. And it is a very story-driven game, despite that on the overall appearance, it looks like it's just a corridor shooter. The game is really defined by two specific gameplay elements. The first is the moment-to-moment gameplay. So when you're flying around in the R-Wing, and you've already seen it happen a few times in this video, up to this point, you'll see it a few times more. Your teammates will call out for help, and they'll fly right in front of you, or they'll pass by you chasing a target. Either way, there is a moment in which, if you're fast enough, you can interact with those enemies and save your teammates or destroy an enemy that your teammate is focusing on. And you will get a little bit of dialogue back. Now, keep in mind, this game is old, so it didn't have the insane branching trees, not anything from like Telltale games or anything along those lines, but if you play the game and you are consistently nice to certain characters, they are typically nicer to you as the story progresses. Inversely, if you are kind of a jerk to your teammates, either shooting them a lot or not bailing them out, they will in turn not be very nice to you. And you see this a lot in the elements, particularly as you lead up to enemy fights. Depending on which teammates you have left will determine what kind of assistance you get. So Slippy, for example, he will scan bosses and he will put their shields and their health on the screen. If Slippy is not around at the end, or if he is really kind of pissed at you, you will not get to that information. Peppy Hare provides just overall gameplay advice. He kind of walks you through boss patterns and sequences, which is really nice. And the cocky Falco Lombardi will occasionally provide, like he did here, alternate routes through stages. And that is really, really cool. And that is solely based on your gameplay type. If you're able to make these tricky shots, if you're able to help and keep your teammates alive, you will find that you are, in fact, rewarded as the game progresses. The other kind of neat thing that this game did, and you saw a bit of it there in the overworld map, is that there are multiple routes to get to Venom. There are lots of planets. There are different ways to take, and those are also determined by these hidden objectives that you have to kind of uncover on your own. Or if you're a young kid like me, you're reading your Nintendo Power. But the idea is that these objectives exist kind of to advance the story in a different way by rewarding you with harder difficulty levels or easing it off a little bit if you're struggling. On that first level, for example, if you noticed, I flew through all of the stone arches. And by doing that, Falco offered me a different route, during which I fought a different boss than I would have fought normally, which leads to a totally separate section of the map here. Otherwise, I would have had to go through the asteroid belt. It would have played out very differently. So each mission has these objectives. Sometimes they're flying through things. Sometimes they're shooting switches or killing targets in a specific amount of time. Either way, it does enhance the experience because, again, if you are a hotshot and you're flying around and smoking everything, you will be rewarded with very different levels than just the more standard playthrough. And that's not to take away from what the standard playthrough offers. Those are very fun levels into themselves. However, only the best of players will get to experience things like the Blue Submarine, which is a underwater level that most people probably didn't even know this game had submarines, but in fact it does. There are two different types of gameplay you're seeing right now. This is called corridor mode. Although the game doesn't explicitly say, let's go in corridor mode, by default this is what the game is going to put you in. This is a chase plane or an internal cockpit view, where you are basically on, for the most part, a rail going in a singular direction. Enemies are thrown at you. Sometimes you have to dodge things or fly under things, but typically you are just shooting directly ahead of you. The second mode is known as all range mode, and that is an actual name of it. They will call out, let's go all range mode. That is where the game will open up considerably and let you fly in any direction. During which you have to do various objectives as well, such as fight bosses, get into dogfights, do bombing runs, that sort of thing. And the game switches between the two, typically at the end for that all-range mode, to mix up some of the gameplay and to allow you to kind of have something different to do. I like them both. They're both very interesting, and I think they both work well when presented with particular boss fights. As I mentioned a little bit ago, with the Blue Submarine, you are not always just locked to your R-Wing. There is a different mission altogether where you can be in the Landmaster tank. This leads into the multiplayer, which I'm not going to really review here, but multiplayer does also offer ground support, where you actually run around on the ground. It is not in the single-player experience. However, it does exist, and it was cool that this game offered such a variety of a rich single-player experience as well as a multiplayer experience, which is fun in its own right. So that's kind of just the overall gameplay of Star Fox. I want to jump into a little bit of the graphics now, and I want to say with the graphics that this really pushed the envelope for what the N64 was offering. If you remember back to the original Star Fox, which came out, very polygonal, very kind of futuristic looking, had some interesting Mode 7 graphics, particularly with draw distances and kind of how some of the terrain was generated. This game definitely pushed the envelope of what the N64 had, and what I really appreciate about this game so much is that I feel like, as weird and as polygonal as it was, everything was grounded in some sort of reality. Enemies made logical sense. They had destructible parts. The ship that you had took visible damage. Your wings could get blown off. Part of the ship began to smoke. The weapons, the bombs, everything seemed to have a certain heft to them, which was definitely aided by controller, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But overall, I feel like when you really look at what this game was trying to push and the frame rate that it tried to adhere to, for the most part, I think it did a really good job of that. And I appreciate when you look at other games which are more cartoony in nature. Mario 64 is a very good example of that. Star Fox has a somewhat realistic, futuristic aesthetic to it, and I think that's what really separates it from some of the other games that were coming around this time. You really notice that, I think, when you're flying, like in this level, for example, flying through this shipyard, as ships are destroying and blowing up around you, as you're zigzagging in and out, almost like Star Wars style. You remember the infamous run at the end of Star Wars. Kind of along those lines, as you're flying in and out of these corridors, these these all-range modes, where there's these large battles going on, and you're seeing enemy ships in combat with friendly ships, and you're seeing different explosions and different environmental damage that is slowly happening to the universe. I think it paints a very beautiful picture in a very fun way that I think is something that shouldn't be ignored. But that's only one half of the experience. The other half of the experience definitely being the overall sound design. Now, as you guys noticed, and one of the reasons why I didn't want to talk at the beginning, I wanted you to hear all the voiceover work. This game does offer quite a bit of voiceover, which was very revolutionary for its time. It's got full recordings of all the major cast and characters, including the villains, all of the ancillary characters that you will meet along your voyage. Bill is going to be coming up here in a moment as just one of the few characters that will come to your aid sometimes. They are all fully voiced as well. A lot of times when you have these games that have multiple characters, only one or two of them is voiced. Perfect example, Mario 64. I'm not picking on it, I love the game. Peach reads the letter to you at the beginning, but every time you interact with Toad throughout the castle, you're just reading text boxes. In Star Fox 64, every single character speaks, and I love that. Now, part of it makes logical sense because when you're flying around and shooting, it's kind of hard to read lengthy pieces of text block. A lot of this dialogue is happening simultaneous to you doing combat, with the exception, obviously, at the end of a level when you're, completing the mission and getting your results and all that thing. But for the most part, your eye is supposed to be on the combat, not supposed to be on these text boxes that pop up. And it's not that they're talking for 20 or 30 minutes each time, not like I'm doing here at least, but it does offer a lot of immersion, I think, as you're kind of hearing the squelching of the various comm channels popping in and popping out, the robotic voice of, the robot, Rob, who is the kind of AI of the giant Star Fox cruiser. As you hear all of your teammates, as you hear allies, as you hear enemy fighters, like later on when you fight Star Wolf and he talks and all of his team, it definitely adds a really cool level to it. Besides that, though, the actual just soundtrack itself I've always found very, very enticing and exciting. I think it adds a lot of flair. It ramps up and ramps down depending on what you're doing and what level's going on. It flares up at the areas it needs to. It kind of is a little more somber in some of the quieter areas of the game, and I think that they have done a really good job capturing this epic space adventure inside of the game. And I really do appreciate that. I am one of these crazy people who bought, years ago, you may remember, as a brief aside, the Super Smash Brothers offered a soundtrack. If you bought both copies of the game, the Wii version and the portable version, you could get through the Club Nintendo, you could buy the soundtrack. And I bought it, and the very first song on there was the original level of Star Fox Corneria, and it's still a phenomenal song to this day. So that always gets me hyped up. I still have it in my truck, and I still do listen to that. But I digress on the review proper of the game. I want to talk about the controller. A lot of people probably saw my video yesterday where I unboxed the N64 controller, and I said I was going to put it through its paces, and I could think of nothing better than to put it through its paces with some good old Star Fox. Now, you guys may remember the box art, and if you saw the very beginning of this video where I actually selected the game, it was on there too, but this was one of the first games to include Rumble Pack support. Remember that the N64 had an expansion slot in the back of it that we didn't really know what it was for when we bought the console. We found out later that you could plug in a small motorized like battery pack into the back of the controller that offered some vibration. And this is one of the first games that ever allowed us to feel the game. Going back to earlier when I said that it's a story-driven game and you are the hero, not only do you play out the hero, not only do you hear it and see it, but now you feel it, which was a very, very cool idea. It offered some nice vibration when you were getting shot at, when you did your boosts, when you hit your bombs, etc. And it works phenomenally here. The N64 controller is very faithful to the original design, and I have had no issues playing with it. I was a little worried because on the Super Nintendo controller that I used for quite a while, it seemed to have an issue with overall range. I don't know if I had a defective unit or not, but it seemed like if I sat really far away or if I covered the top of the controller with my hand, that I would lose connectivity or just completely eat inputs. I can say thankfully that the N64 controller does not have any of those issues. It worked flawlessly. I have probably logged, I'm gonna guess, 8 hours in Star Fox over the last 2 days. Yes, 8 hours. Yes, on Star Fox, because I love it that much. I've already beaten it like 3 times. I wanted to get a feel for some of the various paths as well in preparation for this video. But it works great. You'll probably feel a little bit weird using most of your heavy aiming with your left thumb as opposed to your right. Most people know that. In modern controllers, it's your right analog stick that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Well, the Nintendo 64 only had a single analog stick, and it was used for your left hand. So you may notice that your aiming doesn't feel as natural. You can tell, especially when I'm playing, there's a couple shots I probably should make that I miss, but that's okay. I could say as an adult now, holding on to that center Y piece with where the D-pad would be resting up against my left knuckles, I didn't really notice any discomfort at all. All the buttons felt great, all the responses felt great, and it seemed very precise considering the time of the tech. I could just bump the control stick in a very slight direction, and I was able to be rewarded with what I felt like was some pretty good movement. So I'm a big fan of the N64, I'm a big fan of the Rumble Pack, and I feel like this package is great. So if you're somebody like me, and you sold your console because you're a big dum-dum and you wanted to save up money to buy the next console, which in case for me was the GameCube, I understand. But fear not, the N64 controller along with the Nintendo expansion service I think offers a great value, and for if no other reason, it's to enjoy this phenomenal experience. I hope you guys have enjoyed this deep dive look at Star Fox 64. This was a blast of a video to make. If you made it all the way to the end, congratulations. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.